Once upon a time, in the heart of Lagos, lived a young lady called Chiamaka. She was tall, proud, and sharp-tongued. Her beauty was like the sunrise, bright and impossible to ignore. But along with her beauty came arrogance, so heavy that it followed her like a shadow. Chiamaka worked in one of the biggest companies in Lagos. She dreamed of riches, power, and being worshipped like a queen. To her, respect belonged to only the wealthy and influential. Anyone who didn't look the part was nothing but trash in her eyes, and that arrogance was what brought her face to face with a strange destiny. That morning, the entire office buzzed with anticipation. The long-awaited CEO, Kenny Balogun, was expected for the very first time. No one had ever seen the CEO before, and rumor had it that he was very powerful and wealthy. Even the board of directors whispered that Kenny Balogun was different. He was like a ghost who no one had ever seen, since he was appointed as the CEO 6 months ago. Chiamaka, eager to impress, wore her finest silk blouse and a skirt that hugged her figure like royalty. She told herself that this was her chance to shine brighter than she had ever shone in her entire life. She stormed into the office building that morning, her heels clicking on the marble tiles as her sharp eyes caught sight of a small woman, barely 4 feet tall, walking slowly towards the private elevator. The elevator was so sacred, as it was reserved only for the CEO. Even managers like Chiamaka were forbidden from ever using it, and Chiamaka paused when she saw the strange dwarf approaching the elevator. A wave of disdain spread across her face as she approached her angrily, wondering who the dwarf thinks she is to use the CEO's elevator. "Someone as pathetic as you does not belong here," Chiamaka said to the strange dwarf, who looked up at her and tried to explain herself. But Chiamaka, unwilling to listen to whatever she had to say, ordered the security to throw her into the trash outside. The strange dwarf did everything to explain that she was the CEO of the company, but Chiamaka laughed in her face and called her a loser. "Losers like you are meant to be in the trash, where you belong," she said mockingly to the strange dwarf, who stood there helpless as the office security picked her up and tossed her into the trash bin. Chiamaka watched with satisfaction as the men threw the dwarf into the trash. She pointed her finger angrily at the dwarf, warning her never to step her foot into the company again. Chiamaka returned to her office as she warned the security not to let the dwarf into the company. However, moments later, the glass doors of the lobby opened, and a tall, handsome man in a sharp navy blue suit walked in confidently. His shoes gleamed as his perfume filled the entire air. Chiamaka stood there stunned, her eyes widening in excitement. "This must be him," she thought to herself as she rushed forward to welcome him in. Chiamaka could not let this opportunity pass her by. She had to be in the good books of the CEO if she ever wanted her position to be permanent. She approached him with a smile as she began to speak calmly. "Welcome, sir. You must be our new CEO, Mr. Kenny Balogun. What an honor to meet you, sir," she said to the man, who smiled and asked to be escorted to his office. Chiamaka, eager to please, bowed slightly as she led him straight towards the CEO's office, bypassing all protocols in place. Her colleagues exchanged glances as they watched Chiamaka put on the act of her life just to please the new CEO. They all knew why she did it, but no one dared to challenge her. Chiamaka was always loud and domineering. She loved to always be in control and was willing to do anything to remain relevant. Moments later, they arrived at the CEO's office, and the handsome man sat comfortably in the chair, stretching his legs as though he were the boss. What Chiamaka did not know was that the real boss was outside in the trash, while she ushered a stranger into the most important office in the entire company. Chiamaka did whatever the handsome man told her to do, and the man could not help but compliment her efficiency. He informed her that loyalty like hers was going to be rewarded, and Chiamaka could not contain her joy. She beamed as she dreamt of promotions and fat bonuses. What she did not realize was that she had just handed the keys of the kingdom to a wolf. She fluttered about, offering coffee as she paraded her loyalty for him to see. Soon, the man began to issue strange instructions. He requested for some confidential records and even asked that she shows him the client's list. Chiamaka stood there like a willing subject as the man transferred millions out of the company's account. Chiamaka was too blinded by her desire to impress that she obeyed without asking any questions. She returned to her office some minutes later, excited. When she caught sight of the dwarf again, Chiamaka could not risk anything going wrong, especially not today. She approached the dwarf and dragged her into the female restroom. Filled with so much rage, Chiamaka went on to lock the dwarf in one of the toilet cubicles, warning her never to come out. "I will not allow you to spoil my big day with your nonsense," she said as she walked out of the toilet to go bring the document that her supposed CEO had requested, a very sensitive document that can ruin the company forever. She arrived at the filing room of the company and requested for the document, but the man in charge revealed that Chiamaka did not have the required clearance to access the document. She needed a code that only the CEO of the company could provide. Chiamaka could not contain her rage. She stood there, yelling at the man, saying that she had the required permission of the CEO himself, but the man still refused her access to the document. So Chiamaka turned and walked away angrily. What she did not know was that fate had a way of balancing the scales. As Chiamaka walked angrily to her office, a poor cleaner named Mama Bisi entered the restroom. She was an old woman, bent with years of scrubbing floor. Her uniform was faded, and her rubber slippers slapped against the tiles with each tired step. As she cleaned the sinks, she heard a faint voice calling out for help. Mama Bisi froze, her wrinkled hands trembling as she tugged at the door and yanked it open. To her shock, she found the dwarf woman locked inside, looking exhausted but still composed. Mama Bisi gasped to see the woman locked up in the toilet. "Who locked you in here?" she asked the woman who narrated how Chiamaka, blinded by her own shadow, locked her up in the toilet because of her looks. Without hesitation, Mama Bisi helped the woman out, dusting her suit with the gentleness of a mother who understood what it meant to be looked down on. The dwarf woman looked her in the eyes and began to speak softly. "Today, you have freed not just me, but this entire company from the hands of a thief." Mama Bisi did not understand her words, but deep down, she knew that she had done the right thing. Meanwhile, in the CEO's office, Chiamaka was busy fetching files, passwords and codes for the man who she believed was their CEO. He leaned back in the leather chair, his grin growing wider with each folder that he received. Transfers were being made as millions vanished from the company's account. Yet, Chiamaka, intoxicated by her own ambition, saw nothing but her bright future. She did whatever he asked her to do, not knowing that the man was an impostor. As she stood there in his office, waiting for his next command, the board of directors arrived to formally welcome the CEO to the company. They arrived at the CEO's office, and Chiamaka rushed forward with pride, her smile brighter than the sun, as she ushered them in and introduced the strange man to them as the company's new CEO. But before anyone could speak, the dwarf woman barged into the office. Gasps erupted like thunderclaps as Chiamaka looked at her shocked. She walked up to her and gave her a very hot slap, accusing her of being an embarrassment. "Out! Out of this office before I call security again!" Chiamaka shouted as she tried to drag the woman out of the office. In that moment, the police stormed the office as Chiamaka ordered them to arrest the woman. "Take her away, she's an impostor," Chiamaka said to the officers, who pushed her aside and went on to arrest the man who claimed to be the CEO. Chiamaka stood there stunned to realize that the man was a fraud, a man who had already stolen millions from the company's account. His name was Fatai Jakande, and the police had been on his tail for a very long time. That morning, he strolled into the company to survey the place, to see how he would rob the company. Luckily, Chiamaka made this work easier. She gave him access to the most important office in the company, not caring to check if he was really the CEO or not. The entire board erupted in panic as evidence spilled from his briefcase. Fake ID cards, forged documents, and even USB drives filled with stolen data. The strange man fought violently to escape, but the police pinned him down in seconds as they cuffed him and took him away. Chiamaka's legs turned to water. She staggered backwards, her once bright smile gone, as she stared at the dwarf woman, who was still standing tall, despite being slapped and tossed in the trash like filth. Then, before everyone, the dwarf removed a golden badge from her pocket and placed it on the table. The letters gleamed under the office light, revealing that she was the real Kenny Balogun, the CEO of the company. The room fell silent as Chiamaka's jaw dropped as she began to stammer. "You're the CEO?" she stammered as her heart began to race. She stood there in disbelief as the dwarf woman walked towards the safe in the office and opened it, a thing that only the real CEO could do. Chiamaka began to sweat profusely as she watched the dwarf woman speak, her eyes burning like coal. "I am the CEO that you all were waiting for. And you," she turned to Chiamaka, "you threw me into the trash, locked me in the toilet and slapped me in front of my board. Yet, you gave the throne to a thief." The board turned their eyes to Chiamaka. Her knees buckled as she fell and began to beg for forgiveness. "Please forgive me, madam. I didn't know you were the CEO." Everyone thought that the CEO was a man because of the name Kenny. "Little did we know that you were a woman," she said to Kenny, who shook her head slowly and replied, "Respect is not given because of position or gender. It is given because of humanity. And you failed woefully." Chiamaka stood there and watched as Miss Kenny thanked the poor cleaner for her kindness. "You are the reason we are all safe today," she said to the poor cleaner, who she rewarded hugely for her kindness. Chiamaka, however, was relieved of her job and handed to the police for aiding the criminal in robbing the company of millions. That was how Chiamaka's story spread across Lagos, how she threw the dwarf in the trash, not knowing that she was her boss. Chiamaka learned her lesson the hard way, never to judge a person by their looks, as looks can oftentimes be deceptive. The lesson to be learned from these stories is that pride may blind you, but humility will always open doors that arrogance cannot. Never judge a person by his or her appearance, because appearances can deceive, but character never lies. Chiamaka thought height, beauty and wealth were the measure of greatness, but she discovered too late that true power often comes in the most unexpected forms. The dwarf she mocked was the very destiny she was chasing, and the poor cleaner she ignored became the key to saving the entire company. The lesson is simple but eternal. Pride brings downfall, arrogance blinds the eyes, and respect is the seed of honor. Treat everyone with dignity, for you never know whose hand holds your tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed the story.